Hello, hello. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another Creating Work and Working Creatively session. We're live on StreamYard for the next hour with the Fintone Bay Arts and their AMP Music Open Training Program. Tonight, I would like to introduce you to a friend of mine, Mr. Ian DPM. Ian is a DJ, label owner, label manager, and online platform owner and curator, and has been working in the industry for around the same time as I have, I think about 10 years now. But he's been doing so rather successfully, not like my kind of runaway train method. But we'll get into that a little bit more in a bit. Just before we start, I'd just like to say that we will have a window for about 10 minutes at the end of the session for questions. So if you do have any spring to mind throughout the session, just comment in the chat window on the right-hand side, and our tech guru, Steve, will log them and pass them on to me for the end. So without further ado, hello, Ian. Welcome to this session. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I think we're just saying we're both getting over the lurgy, so I'm kind of like in the throes of it just now. So you'll have to bear with me if I need to blow my nose at some point. So I thought we would just, before we get started on any further introductions and the discussion, I thought we'd just share a snippet of a mix of yours so that folks tuning in can get a feel of what you're about. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Brilliant. So we've got a snippet from your Dimensions Festival mix. It came out a couple of years ago. So we'll play that and then we'll get stuck in.
Okay.
Nice. What a good mix. That's class. I actually haven't listened to that one yet, so I need to go back and listen to it from that snippet for sure. Lots
That
of
one,
what was that, sorry?
that one's a bit of a wild one. I think I'll go from like 90 BPM to like 140 in an hour. So it's like super
Nice. High energy.
fun one, yeah.
Yeah. So was that to coincide with your performance at Dimensions?
No, that was what got me the performance Dimensions. So it was like
sweet.
it was like a competition with Dimensions and the Identification of Music group, the group on Facebook.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, I'll do a mix. And they said it's like supposed to open up the space I played in, which is called the ballroom, which is like you walk in and it's like huge walls all around you, like tiny 100 capacity, like circle sort of courtyard thing. So I've kind of went with the idea I'll start from like as slow as I play to like kind of
at the tail end of where the other end,
yeah. So I think that mix in full was probably my favorite mix that I've put together.
Nice.
Everything,
I think sometimes like for me, my favorite mixes are the ones that I try and do as true a representation as to what I would do in that scenario. Like you say, like you were making a mix with that scenario in mind, rather than like a theme of like an overarching theme of something that's nothing to do with like the club or whatever. I mean, they both hold water, but yeah. Brilliant. Well, I thought that I gave you a bit too brief an intro, so I thought you could maybe tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do within the underground dance music scene.
Cool. All right. So I go by Ian DPM in like everything that I do in music. So my day job is I am the label manager for Lobster Theremin, which is big independent dance music labels run by Asquith. And there's like 4 or 5 family labels. Basically, I look after all of them. I'm kind of the point of contact to get a record from the point where you're asking for demos and like conceptualizing it right to the very point where it's like coming out. So it's kind of sorting the A&R side of things, commissioning remixes, sending things off to get mixed and mastered and pressed up, and then like kind of just dealing with everything that the artist needs from me in that whole sort of pipeline. So I'm basically kind of there to make sure things don't really halt in the process. I'm kind of just watching over.
Yeah, and making sure that the artists who are featuring are like have all the information that they need and are feeling supported and whatnot as well. I guess. Yeah.
It's a lot of like admin and HR for the artist, really. Like it sounds like mad glamorous, but it's just kind of making sure things are getting done, basically.
Yeah, but I mean that's what like our last session last week with Rachel Williams, we were chatting about that and how the from the outside it looks very glamorous and from the inside it is admin. It's just like dotting the I's and crossing the T's to make sure that you don't get caught up further down the line and it costs you money or costs the artist confidence or whatnot,
Yeah, it is just I work from home and my day 10 till 6 sat on my computer just emailing people and filling out spreadsheets basically. But don't get me wrong, it's fun. It's nice to be part of the process, but it's not like going out and hanging out with DJs every day and doing all this.
It's not that. It's not like turning up to the airport in a limo with a bottle of champagne, picking up the artist. No. So what else? What else do you do at the moment then?
So I run my own label with my partner. The label's called Scuffed Recordings. It's kind of on like the left field bass music breaks sort of side of things. We've been running that for about 4 years now. I have a YouTube channel / SoundCloud channel / platform, which is kind of the first thing that I got into in music. That's called Definite Pie Material. That's where like the DPMs comes from in my name. And now it's kind of more of a platform for like sharing things that I've been sent from labels like before they come out and premieres and stuff like that. But when it began, it was just kind of because I wanted to kind of share music in a way that, in like a 21st century way, basically, because I didn't have that many friends around me. I was like, how can I share it to more people?
That's really interesting. So then that kind of leads on to what kind of drew you to this scene. Was it like obviously an interest in dance music and whatnot, but what were some like moments that if you can remember, defining moments that drew you to wanting to get involved and share your voice and not just be a passenger, so to speak?
I can't really put like a finger on it. There's a few little moments that come up. Like when I was younger, when I was like 18, 19, when I started clubbing, I wasn't going to like techno clubs. I'm from Portsmouth on the south coast, which is where I live now actually. But yeah, there was like one night a month it was like dance music, but then we'd still go clubbing like every Thursday to like this little basement like indie bar. We danced like indie dance music basically. And I guess that was kind of like my introduction to clubbing. And then I saw Magnetic Man at Festival like the summer before I went to uni. I was like, okay, I kind of get this dance music thing now. This is sick. And then I went to uni. I was there for a few years, kind of like going out, going clubbing. I wasn't into anything like super specialist or super like cool. It was just like whatever was there basically. And then towards like my second, third year, we started throwing house parties, and that's kind of where
it
kind of got the bug to kind of be like, okay, cool. I want to like find something a little bit different. I want to find more tunes to play at this party to my friends. And yeah, we'd go out. We'd like meet up like 3-4 hours before the night even started. Just sit there, like have a drink and like listen to some tunes. Be like, listen to this, listen to this, listen to this. And then that's kind of the motivation behind everything I do now. I guess just like showing people stuff that I think is cool that haven't been shown. Basically.
I think it's definitely the kind of the right building blocks to have for working in the industry as well, because like it's quite easy to see sometimes when it's coming from an ego-driven point of view. You can quite easily, not always, but it's sometimes quite easy to see that's the standpoint it started from. But like the people who make a difference and have something valuable to say are those who are just lovers of music and want to share what they love with others because they are kindred spirits and they think that they'll enjoy it. So yeah, like basically I mean, I was the same. I had pretty much the exact same experience as you. I went to university and got into nightclubs, and then was like a photographer for a couple of years, and then just hung around like a bad smell some promoters until they gave me a chance on the decks. And I absolutely butchered it the first few times, but you know, that's how it is. So yeah, I thought we could talk a little bit more about, because you've mentioned, you know, like finding and building, well, with Definite Party Material at the start, but now with, you know, like with Scuffed Recordings as well. So you've mentioned it, obviously you co-run Scuffed. And from my point of view, it's a label that does have a real community aspect to it. And it's not just like your kind of run-of-the-mill presence that a lot of, not a lot of, but some record labels have. So I thought we could maybe have a quick listen to a track from the discography and then talk a little bit more about how you've built that community around Scuffed.
Yeah.
Cool.
Good.
So good. I love that EP so much.
Yeah, I think that's our first big
Success.
EP where we were kind of
Yeah.
like, okay.
Yeah, I remember when that one came out, and the buzz around it was just insane. Like it's like so interesting, all the sounds that are, I don't know, like because the first portion of the song, like you're not expecting those vocal samples at all. Do you
Yeah,
know what I mean? Like it feels like it's going to be like a heavy techno track sort of thing, and then it adds this kind of like softness to it that is almost contradictory, but really, really works really, really well throughout the rest of the song, and it adds this kind of euphoria to it. So good, so good. And the Nicky Nair remix as well. Obviously, that one popped off as well.
Yeah,
Just
that one.
insane.
I think it might be on the list to play later, but that one, it came out when the clubs were closed, and that's like the one release where we like wish we could have waited, but
yeah,
yeah.
It is what it is, indeed. So yeah, obviously that's from Scuffed Recordings, and we've just talked pretty briefly about Definite Party Material, but I thought we could intro the label a little bit more, and you could explain. So like obviously, Definite Party Material was your first venture into sharing music. What made you want to go from sharing other people's music to then curating and sharing? Music of your own, or music that people have, for your own record label?
I guess I'd kind of developed my taste a little bit because I was kind of like not forcing myself, but I was kind of like making it part of my routine to go dig for stuff and find exactly what I liked. And then in that process, I kind of started getting sent stuff once people noticed, okay, this guy's got a nice channel. And then at the same time, I started chatting to Will Wager, who I run the label with, about the channel as well. And it all kind of came together where it was like, we're finding all these amazing new artists that are kind of not really getting pushed anywhere. And we're also getting sent this great stuff at the same time. And it all kind of didn't really have, some music you think, okay, this fits on this label, this fits on this label. A lot of the music we were kind of finding didn't really have that sort of, didn't have a sound associated with. So we were like, cool, should we just give it a go ourselves? And just through like running the channel and getting sent stuff and seeing how things are released, we kind of like, the whole like release schedule thing kind of like rubbed off just from observing
I guess
it.
just like gleaning information from others as you're like requesting info for doing premieres and hosting and stuff like that.
Yeah, pretty much.
So yeah, like I said about the community aspect of Scuffed, how did you? Because obviously you had to start somewhere. Did the audience from Definite Party Material, did that help to build the community around Scuffed, or was it its own community? Because obviously you went from DPM and it being like a huge selection of different people's music from all over the shop to then being a more refined and curated idea of what it was you were into.
I think I'd say a bit of both, to be honest. Like, obviously I was and still am fortunate enough to have a platform big enough that I can kind of like signal boost certain things if I really want to like get them out there. But at the same time, I think the way that I've always approached things in music is just to kind of be like quite open and approachable, and like everything I do has like a little bit of a sense of a humor. I'll comment on my own videos and chat to people and stuff, like, because I feel like music's enjoyed the best with other people. Like, I don't want to be like some faceless sort of entity that's kind of like churning stuff out here and now. I want people to know, that's Ian. He's kind of into this, he's into that, because I feel like it's a bit weird when you're kind of getting recommended music, but there's a person behind it, but it feels like it's like an algorithm, because you can't actually tell, like, is that a person? Is that a team? Like, it doesn't feel sincere to me. I feel like that's kind of how I want it to appear in everything that I'm doing. So it's kind of just been how I operate, really.
Yeah, so, and I think that's super important, because like you say, with the kind of algorithm thing, and also the fact that we're inundated with information all the time these days from all different avenues, like if it falls under the bracket of being a kind of faceless Not entirely sure who it is that's doing this. It's great, but it's very difficult to like align yourself with something like that because you have your own personal feelings about the music. And if you can chat to someone who also has those personal feelings and shared or discussion about it, like you're saying with being commenting on your own videos and stuff like that, it leans towards people kind of having a sense of loyalty more so than if it's just like a faceless label that every so often pops up on YouTube or releases something and no one really knows who it is. I mean, that sometimes also can work in as a benefit if you're wanting to like market something as kind of, what's the word, obscure or mysterious, you know, and like with now everyone having access to everything, that can also have the two-sided thing. I mean, because obviously I run Redstone Press with my label partner Ethan, and Ian, you actually gave us our first premiere on Definite Party Material way back when. But yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, like a premiere is what it says on the tin. It's usually an exclusive hosting of a song or track from an EP that hasn't been released yet by a record label on a platform that has a following, so that then that leads to a following of that specific label or artist. Did the building of community with DPM, is it comparable to Scuffed, or were they slightly different? Because you obviously started far more grassroots with DPM than maybe by the time you started Scuffed, you already had quite a lot of like industry knowledge and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, with DPM, like for the first 2 years, I don't think I even hit like 1,000 subscribers. I was literally just uploading tunes just to upload them, and then I think one or two tracks, kind of, they must have got like played in a boiler room or some big DJ played it somewhere, and then things kind of like went from there. So it wasn't really. I didn't really build it for a long time, but then like once people start to come, that's when like the conversations start, and you start kind of like building connections with people. With Scuffed, obviously, I had a little bit of a reputation for kind of being into a certain kind of music, which helped at the beginning, and I had that platform to kind of jump off of. But I think it's very different because obviously with Scuffed, we're dealing with like our designer, we've got all our artists, and then it's more of like there's more like components to it than with the channel where it's just me just sorting stuff out. With Scuffed, it's kind of like, yeah, we'll speak to the artist. We kind of have to like figure out what they want from what we're doing with them, and then like we'll bring them in and like they get to meet everyone else that's like on the label as well. Like we've made sure we've got like a little Facebook group called Team Scuffed where everyone just like posts all their like demos and stuff like that. And it's more like it's just like a friend group really. Like, you know, you do the same things with your friends, like listen to this tune or this is what I've been making, and yeah, it's basically the same except for the fact that we will just put their music out and pay them for it as well.
Yeah. And I guess as well, like by having that like Facebook group, and because that's something that I don't do with Redstone Press, and it is something that now thinking about it is such a great tool, because by the time the music comes out, there's a real sense of family and like community within the group of people that are operating under Scuffed anyway. So then when the music comes out, that's already a formulated image that goes out public, if you know what I mean, and people can really like identify with that. Whereas we've had the kind of, with Redstone Press, we kind of tried to do the gently approach and tried to be mysterious and stuff like that, because we were from like the middle of nowhere and didn't have really a clue what we were doing. And like I think I'd been really influenced by a Pearson Sound Red Bull Music Academy lecture where he talks about anti-promotion. And so we were really following that. But looking back, and if I'm like hypercritical, I think it helped in creating a little bit of a mystery around the label. But then there's no like, I mean, I obviously make sure that anyone I'm working with like is someone that I'd want to go out for a drink with, or you know, like would want to be friends with anyway, because it's too much work for it to be that anonymous, you know. But I do think that like having a small controllable group that you can input and add people to, so that they don't feel like they're, you know, like there's this huge back catalog of amazing artists, and they're feeling really nervous because they've out of the blue they're adding their music to it. They're already before the music's come out, they're like making friends with everyone on the label already. So I thought we would let me just have a look. Sorry, I've lost a little bit of my my trajectory. Would you now, looking at like the way that you approach Scuffed, and what, because Scuffed is how old now?
4 years.
4. So a lot's changed in the last 4 years. Would you if you were to start another project similar to Scuffed, would you approach it the same way?
Not exactly the same. I mean, there's pros and cons to how we operate now. Obviously, where we're at now, we're very fortunate that we don't do like vinyl for every release, because that's kind of like gone out the window this year. And I mean, there's things that we put out at the beginning I wouldn't put out now, because kind of we know where we are a little bit more. And I think with music, it changes so quickly. Like what sounds people are into, how they listen to these sounds. Like when we started, Spotify wasn't like getting a Spotify playlist in or anything like that. That wasn't important, but now it's like such a big thing. Even like I started Definite Pie material probably like 3-4 years before then, and at that point premieres like weren't a thing in like the sort of the release cycle, and now it's like it's had its point where it's peaked, and now it's like everyone's doing premieres. And like I wouldn't do the same, because I think you have to sit and look and see how people are kind of being transmitted music at that time. Kind of like start properly, because the way we operated 4 years ago wouldn't be ideal for now. It's not to say that it wouldn't work, but it wouldn't be perfect.
It maybe wouldn't be as successful. I think the Spotify thing is, and the premieres definitely, because when we started Redstone Press, which was pretty much the same time as you started Scuffed, premieres were the way that you got the music out there, and they were like it was seen as the kind of qualified version of promotion, so to speak. And obviously like furthering on like interviews and whatnot with artists and whatnot like that. But Spotify wasn't even a consideration for us. And then someone a couple of years later was like, "Oh, you should probably get it on Spotify." And I'm so anti Spotify, but now I'm like, "Oh, I've totally missed a beat here," because it's now it's like the way 95% of people intake music these days. Which is insane. Whereas 4 years ago that wasn't the case whatsoever.
It changes so quickly. I mean, like, I think you have to kind of keep an eye on what people are doing, because you don't know what's going to be super important in a year's time. Even like Spotify playlists, we started one last year, now it's doing quite nicely, because we kind of like realize, okay, this is kind of what people are doing. Because I think it's the same with like DJ mixes. Like so many platforms do mixes now, it's kind of like diluted it a lot. So I think, and obviously with people on Spotify, I think Spotify playlists are a nicer way to kind of introduce the sound to people.
And I guess it's also because it's a song that stands on its own, rather than like you don't necessarily have to commit to listening to an hour's mix or something like that. If you're like, it's like a Tuesday evening and you're knackered, do you know what I mean? You're not like, oh right, I'm going to stick on this like really heavy techno mix with loads of Scuffed material in it, if you're not feeling it, do you know what I mean? Whereas having your Spotify in the background, and if you're like, oh, I'll just check it out, like you can take it or leave it. It's a little bit less committal in some respects, which makes it easier to ingest. I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, there's two sides to it. I think like it's the same with like vinyl versus digital. I think a lot of people that still primarily doing vinyl do it because they have that sort of link to it. They feel like if you like it that much, you'll get it on vinyl. But you can't expect everyone to kind of have a nice record player and loads of money and the time to like get a record and put it on vinyl and listen to it there. Like it's just how people use it.
The accessibility of it's far less accessible. You know, like it also costs a lot more. You're buying 4 tracks for what now, 15 quid, you know, which is like an average. And like you say, if you don't have the equipment at home to be able to listen to it, it then is just a piece of art that sits on the shelf. I'm currently, like Ethan and I are currently in discussions about how we're looking at other ways to release music as well, because obviously environmentally as well, looking at vinyl production, and there not being a hugely there's not a big market for environmentally minded pressing at the moment yet. It's still very much in its infancy, and it's not efficient yet or cost effective for an independent record label that maybe is having to pay for all of the releases themselves rather than having a pressing and distribution deal or something like that. But I think, the key point is definitely being adaptable and maybe not necessarily trying to forecast trends and stuff like that, but just being part of the wider community and the wider scene and seeing how different technologies affect the scene and how they might be able to move forward. Because like I said, I was so anti Spotify, and it's definitely now past its zenith of like getting ahead of it, like getting involved before it reaches its peak. And now like it's so saturated, and there are so many playlists and stuff like that you've had a year to work on yours, and it's picking up steam now, but it would take us 2 years to work on, probably to get one going now. And by that point, maybe Spotify won't even be, it will be like premieres, maybe it'll be so saturated that people won't be into it as much. Who knows? But so with these thoughts in mind, do you have any advice for anyone who'd be looking to start a record label now? And I know we've talked about building like a kind of audience around it, but if you have any other ideas about how to create an audience as well for someone who maybe doesn't have like a YouTube platform or something like that.
I mean, there's loads of like Facebook groups for certain genres of music if you can hunt them down. Like Reddit is a good place to kind of like find like-minded people. Discord, if you can find one. I mean, there's like loads of ways that you can kind of like link up with people and kind of if you don't have like friends in that sort of tribe, you can link up with them there and kind of share music, kind of develop your taste and your ideas a bit more. I think it's important to kind of have that perspective of where you want to be in the wider scene, because you can kind of put something out, and if it does really well, that's all good and well, but if you don't have like some sort of idea of like what you want to build from that, it doesn't really help. I think if you have an idea, and it can change, it's not going to be exactly the same. Like you can have a release and then you think, okay, I'm not into that anymore, or you hear something else and think, I want to explore that. But if you have some sort of like grounding in the first place that you can build off of like in your head, I think that's probably the most important thing. I'd say learn a bit about the process, enough about the process that you can understand if someone does it differently to you, because there's no like one size fits all way of putting out music, especially in like the more left field, more independent DIY sort of scenes. So if you can kind of like understand like why someone else is doing like a short rollout, why someone is launching with like a single on streaming before, or why someone's doing it in this format or that format, or like things like that. It's something you can soak in quite easily, but I think you need to be aware that that's something that people are kind of planning. So if you can kind of like put together like a list of like how you'd want to go about doing something, that's when you can kind of compare it to how someone else has done it and be like, cool, okay, I think I can change this variable here and see how that works the next time around. You know what I mean?
Next release sort of thing. Oh, I guess as well, there's also like within the kind of like you say, left field kind of niche underground dance music scene, there are so many like nuanced ways of like loads of different labels do it in totally different ways. Some are like really punk in how they release their music, and it's like it is, like you say, like a really limited press, or it's a tape, or there's a zine that goes with it and stuff like that, because it all falls. There's so many different ways of doing it, and I guess if you, like you say, you have an idea of how you'd like, or like the target that you'd like to reach and how you'd like your label to be seen, then you can go and compare to other like-minded labels, or take things from other aspects of releasing music that maybe labels in your kind of field aren't doing, and that brings something fresh and something new, and that makes you noticed. So like we've talked about, obviously anyone wanting to start a label, but you also manage, like you say, a very successful label in Lobster Theremin. How have you found your experience with Lobster Theremin, like starting with a predefined large audience and large following? And do you work on like expanding that, or is that part of the role within Lobster Themin?
All right, so I started at Lobster Ferryman. It's actually a year tomorrow. Funny enough.
Wow! Congrats.
Thank you. And I guess the difference is like there is a lot less focus on building an audience and kind of because the label has its identity now, and like if they want to do something different, we've got other sub labels around it to kind of like explore those ideas rather than it going through Lobster Ferry and the main label. We have like the resources to say like, oh, we'll start a new sub label here to do this. So it's not so much kind of like developing the audience, more as kind of like communicating what we're doing with them. So like, with Scuffed, it's kind of like we're still trying to like get people on board who are like into this sort of music because it's not established. I don't think it's established as much as like other big labels are. So yeah, with Lobster, it's more kind of just kind of getting everything out of like maximum impact, like trying to cut through all the noise, everything else going on. We want to be like up here with everything out. So it's a lot more kind of focused on like the marketing and making sure everything's presented nicely rather than
building the fan base essentially. Yeah. That's
like, not to say we're ignoring the fan base, but like there's a lot. It's more of like a machine really.
Yeah.
In a smaller label, yeah.
Well, I guess also as well because you've got that fan base, it's reliable, they're loyal, they've stuck with Lobster Theremin for X amount of years and will buy the releases and things like that. So it's managing that fan base more than and like less trying to expand. Obviously, always trying to expand anyway. I mean, that's just a given. But yeah, all right, cool. Well, I thought we could maybe just have a quick listen to a song. Well, I'm gonna go pretty ego here, and a song off my record label. We'll just play a half of it, Steve, because I'm aware of the time. So this is by Liam Robertson, and this was our most recent release, which now, when I think about it, is almost a year and a half ago, thanks to the pandemic. This one's called Wrestling Halfbeat Fighting Taxa. Awesome. So we've talked a little bit about the kind of building and creating a community around separate entities to yourself, so to speak, as in like your business, your creative projects. But I thought we could talk a little bit about personal development as well, because we're both at a point where we have representation in different ways in the scene, and we're DJing semi full-time for yourself. I mean, you're definitely DJing full-time in comparison to myself, and you're working full-time in the music industry. Can you, was the work with Lobster Theremin, was that off the back of the work with Scuffed in some respects? Did like Jimmy see what you were managing to create with Scuffed and wanted to get you involved with Lobster?
Basically what happened was, before I worked at Lobster Themin, I was working at an events company, like doing live events, and I was like social media assistant there. And obviously when we hit March 2020, everything just stopped. And there was no events anymore. So I was on furlough for ages. And then like the week before furlough was supposed to end, they're like, okay, even if things come back, we don't really have anything for you to do at the moment, because we like had to like downsize the whole company. So I just did a tweet and I was just like, has anyone got any music work going? Because that was like the job I had before. I'd been there for a year, and that was the first job I'd had like full time in anything to do with music. I was working in like bars and restaurants and stuff before, and I was like, okay, I'm not going back. So I just did that tweet, and I guess Jimmy was like aware of what I was doing with my YouTube channel and the label, just because it's a small scene and I was quite active, like quite vocal. I think we'd spoken on Twitter a few times, and he's like, yeah, I think I could have something for you if you send over a CV and kind of like demonstrate that, you know, you do know what you're doing. So I guess like, in a sense, I think I definitely kind of, with Scuffed, I developed more of like my business sense of music there for sure. And for the record, I studied for a degree in music business when I was at uni. I didn't get it, and it was more kind of geared towards like working at a major label. But I think I kind of absorbed the information from that as well. That kind of like helped me out there. So I think it's definitely with my work there. But at the same time, I've always been kind of like quite aware of what's going on in the business side of music. That's kind of like just something that interests me anyway. So I think I've been able to kind of communicate that in things that I am doing quite well. So yeah, it's not, you don't necessarily have to have like an amazing job or like a really good CV if you can kind of like demonstrate, okay, I have this interest and I'm trying to develop it at this point, but maybe I haven't been in a place where I can kind of do that, so I've had to do it myself, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And so like, when did you make the conscious decision, because you're saying you were working in bars and things like that, did it get to a point with the music work before Lobster for that year? Did it get to a point where you were just like, right, that's it, like I'm done with this like lifestyle of like working in bars and the kind of the day job in that respect, and you were like, was there a point where you were like, right, I'm going to focus solely on working full time? Or did it not just happen? Obviously it didn't just happen, but was it slightly more organic?
To be fair, it's quite a long way. Like, I moved to Bristol to kind of like, I'm living in Portsmouth now because I'm back because of like family reasons, but I wanted to move out and kind of go somewhere where something that I was into was happening, and that was like the main reason I moved to Bristol. And so I tried to get involved in a few things here and there the whole time I was there. Like, I was running nights with my friends. I've been doing radio and news radio in Bristol for 5 years now. I'm still on the station now. Like, I've always been kind of getting involved, but it was kind of like I did want to work full time in music, but at the same time, like, I knew I hadn't got my degree, and I knew there's a lot of people in the city that were kind of like really into what I was doing as well and a bit more qualified. So I was never really like gunning for like a full-time thing. I was kind of like, I was going to interviews here and there, doing like internships and stuff. But I just wanted to be involved anyway. So like, I was meeting so many people on nights out and putting so many things on and doing so many other things. And then I guess it kind of got to the point where, I went for like one interview and they kind of like noticed, or they're like, oh yeah, someone, we know you've been doing this. We've seen like the flyers, or we've seen this, or we've seen that. And then that was kind of the point where it kind of tipped over to like, okay, maybe I can actually work here. Because I was kind of getting to the point where I was like, I'm going to have to find like an office job or something.
Yeah.
But, yeah, just got lucky.
Yeah. Well, I mean, luck. Yeah, of course. But I mean, the point you just made that actually really resonated with me was that that when you went for the interview, someone recognized you because of the amount of stuff that you've been getting involved in without there being necessarily like a paycheck at the end of it. Like you say, with 5 years with Nudes, that's big. I mean, that's, like not many people can say that they've been with a radio station for 5 years. And especially from the start as well, really, because Nudes is still quite young relatively. And I think it totally pays dividends to just be energetic and positive and active within the scene, even if there's no real, like, there's not a definitive paycheck coming, so to speak. Like if it shows your motivation in what you do and the love for what you do, then when an opportunity arises, someone will take note of that. And it's kind of like an unofficial CV of sorts in some respects. Because I mean, I'm like, in comparison, I'm still working a day job. It's like I try and like DJ on the weekends, and then we'll run Redstone Press on my days off. And it's on the whole pretty hectic all the time. And a lot of the times I'm thinking, it'd be great to be able to dedicate my time to this full time. But I know as well that the opportunities right now are quite sparse. And so it's quite a blessing to have that financial backing of a day job. But then in time, I think what I'm trying to work towards is doing what you've been doing, which is getting involved, to getting my fingers in a few pies of different creative work, like job opportunities, but also just being involved in different creative outlets, so that when the right thing comes along, you've got that back catalogue, so to speak, of experience, and people think, oh, okay, they've been doing it for years. It's not just they've woke up one morning and thought, I kind of want to do this, and then have turned up to the interview, so to speak. So I thought we could, because I am again just having a look at the time, we've got about just over 5 minutes. So let's just talk a little bit about the agency that you are on, Eminent. And we can maybe compare, because I've got a manager and you've got an agent, and I don't know if you've got a manager or not, but I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about the differences in those. So could you talk a little bit about how the representation with Eminent came along?
So Huel, that runs Eminent, is a close friend of mine from Bristol. He was running Eminent as there's Eminent a club night, which is the first part of the Eminent agencies kind of shot off from that. And I'd been running my own nights, and then we'd been going to each other's nights, kind of like became friends from there. And then I think with Bristol being such a small place, you meet someone once or twice, and then you see them everywhere after that. And basically he's kind of been like, I guess, like a fan, or like following what I've been doing since it was just kind of like just me and my friends in Bristol doing stuff. And he said to me like, yeah, I'm starting an agency, do you want to get involved? And I was like, you know what, I'd rather sign this off to like my friend and have him help me out with it than, wait and then have some stranger that I don't know like, what their intentions are to kind of do it. And he's been my agent for like maybe like 3 years now. But because we're quite good friends, it's quite an informal sort of agreement basically. But it's like, if something comes in or someone's interested in something, for me specifically, if it's a good friend of mine, maybe I'll say I'll do it direct, which I wouldn't follow that advice for most people, because it is kind of a breach of contract, but obviously he's my friend. But like basically I'll pass stuff on to him. He'll make sure that I get like transport sorted. He'll make sure that I get like paid properly. He'll make sure that everything's kind of all right on the sort of the admin side of things, basically. Because there's been points where I have like 3-4 gigs in a month, and I've got to go from like one place to another. Sometimes you've got to like get on a train for 8 hours or fly for it. And he just kind of like he's that sort of buffer that A, he can tell someone off if I'm like a little bit upset about something.
Yeah.
And B, like he can just kind of sort all that admin bit out that I don't necessarily always have time to do or have the energy to kind of sit down and do. So that's primarily like what he does. But yeah, like I said, he runs events as well. So kind of we work together on certain things. Like it's quite
symbiotic kind of relationship.
Sort of thing. But yeah, like he's a good friend of mine. So it's kind of been ideal that we can kind of explore that side of things together. You know
I think it's also really important. Like it's really beneficial to have someone who believes in what you do, and a friend especially does, and they do have your best interests at heart. You know, it's the same with my manager Hannah. They first and foremost are one of my best friends, and then we've now agreed to work together, and we're both, you know, in the same way that you joined with Huel probably in the infancy of Eminent. In the same way, Hannah is stepping out on their own, and I'm also stepping out on my own in that regard. So it's a relationship where we can both make mistakes and learn at the same time, and there's no pressure to be something more than you are for either person. And I think like if you know, like sometimes having that person, like you say, that can have those difficult conversations with a promoter or fight your corner for something that if it were left to you or I, we'd probably just lean over and go, oh no, don't worry about it, it's fine, I'll sleep on a sofa or something like that. But like they have your best interests at heart, and they want to make sure that your performance or whatever it is that you're doing is the best it can be. And do you I mean, because we're both the thing is, we're both coming from this from like our friends, our agent and our manager, so it's maybe quite difficult to, I don't really have too much advice for anyone who might be reaching out to an agency, so to speak, that they don't know about. I don't know if you have any advice about that.
I'd say, because I've got like throughout working in music, I've made friends with people like in all sorts of levels of it. I'd say, A, read through exactly what you're kind of getting out of it. You don't want to be stuck in something where you're like, you have to be on a contract for like 3 years because there's a certain clause in there that says you have to renew it or something like that. Make sure you kind of like, look through anything you sign. I'd say that with anything, basically, not just representation. As far as like agents and managers go, maybe look at how the rest of their roster is kind of being treated and how, you know, how they're doing their job with other people. Because you can look at an agency and be like, okay, cool, they've got like all these massive DJs on there. If I'm on there, I'm sorted. But then if you look closely and you see that people a little bit lower down aren't really getting the same sort of preferential treatment, you don't want to get stuck in a situation where you lose like 1 or 2 years of your career because, you know, someone's not pushing you in that side of things, and you could have just done it yourself. And I guess I wouldn't necessarily seek it out. I think you'll know when you need someone to kind of help you with that sort of thing. I think a few years ago, I was like, before I signed them, and I was like, cool, if an agent like hits me up, that's going to be it. I'm going to be
sorted.
I'm going to be sorted. But now looking back, obviously I'm happy for my situation, but I know at the same time, if something had come up then, I would have been quite naive to kind of say, you know, this is exactly what I need right now. I think if you know when it's time to kind of take things up to the next,
take that step, and also hold worth in what you do, and don't compromise on your creative output in order to take those steps, because like what you just said, you can do it on your own, and if you have the time and you have the kind of logistical and project management kind of nows to do so, then you don't necessarily need an agent. And I know a lot of people, or a manager, and I know a lot of people who do that. Sadly, we are careening towards the end of the hour, Ian, and we've managed to not get through everything, which is the same as last week. I think this is going to be a recurring theme somehow. But I thought we would just finish with one of the more recent Scuff releases from Aisha. This is absolutely one of my favorites, and I think I play it in literally every single set. So this one's called Dark Matter, and I'd just like to thank you again, Ian. This has been really informative. I'm looking forward to being able to hang out with you at some point, and we'll be back yeah, and we'll be back in a week's time or 2 weeks' time with our next guest, and we'll be sharing some info about that in the next couple of weeks. Thanks, Ian, very much.
Thank you. Cheers.